Have you ever had a moment where something so ordinary, so mundane, suddenly became the catalyst for the most extraordinary change in your life? That's exactly what happened to me last summer at Miller's Corner Store, a small family-owned shop nestled between a laundromat and a Thai restaurant in our little town of Oak Ridge. I'm Jamie, by the way, 23, fresh out of college with an art degree that was already collecting dust as I worked my way through a series of odd jobs. I'd lived in Oak Ridge my whole life, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every face at the local diner, and honestly, I was itching to leave. But sometimes, the universe has other plans, doesn't it? And sometimes those plans walk right into your life wearing a faded blue t-shirt and the kind of smile that makes you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. His name was Eli, 25, new to town, with dark curly hair that fell just above his eyes and a laugh that seemed to start somewhere deep in his chest before it tumbled out, infectious and warm. I'd seen him around town a few times before we actually met, at the farmer's market, in the library, once at a local band night at the Rusty Nail. But Miller's Corner Store, with its flickering fluorescent lights and the perpetual smell of coffee and cinnamon gum, that's where our story really began. It was a Tuesday evening in July, one of those summer days where the heat lingers well into the night, making everything feel a little slower, a little dreamier. I'd stopped by Miller's to grab some ice cream and maybe a magazine, my typical lonely Tuesday night ritual. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, and Mrs. Miller, who'd known me since I was stealing penny candy at age 6, waved from behind the counter. The store was empty except for a figure crouched down in the snack aisle, seemingly deep in contemplation of the chip selection. I remember the way the air conditioning hit my skin as I walked in, raising goosebumps along my arms. I headed straight for the freezer section at the back, scanning the ice cream options even though I already knew I'd pick the same thing I always did, mint chocolate chip in the small container. As I reached for the freezer door, I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me," he said, and I turned to find myself face to face with Eli. Up close, his eyes were even more striking, a warm amber color that caught the light in a way that made them look almost gold. "Do you know if they sell lottery tickets here?" I nodded, momentarily forgetting how to form words. Yeah, I finally managed. "Up at the counter. Mrs. Miller can help you." He smiled, and something in my chest did a little flip. "Thanks. I'm feeling lucky today." He extended his hand. "I'm Eli, by the way. Just moved here from Chicago." "Jamie," I replied, taking his hand. His palm was warm against mine, and I noticed a small tattoo on his wrist, a simple line drawing of a compass. "Welcome to Oak Ridge, where the excitement never stops, as you can clearly see." I gestured around the empty store with my free hand. He laughed, and there it was, that laugh that seemed to fill up the whole space. "I don't know. Seems pretty exciting to me right now." His eyes held mine for just a beat longer than necessary, and I felt my cheeks flush. We walked to the counter together, my ice cream forgotten in the freezer. Mrs. Miller looked between us with that knowing smile older women seem to perfect, the one that says they can see things you can't yet. Eli asked for a lottery ticket. Powerball, $2. And as he reached for his wallet, I had one of those impulses that seemed to come from nowhere. "Let's go half on it," I said, surprising myself as much as him. I'd never bought a lottery ticket in my life. My dad had always called them a tax on people who couldn't do math, and I'd inherited his practical nature. But something about this moment, about Eli, made me want to do something spontaneous. Eli turned to me, eyebrows raised in surprise, but his smile widened. "Really? You want to go halfsies on a lottery ticket with a complete stranger?" I shrugged, trying to appear more casual than I felt. "Why not? Like you said, you're feeling lucky today. Maybe some of that luck will rub off on me. Or maybe I'll just drag you down with my terrible luck," he countered, but he was already pulling out a single-dollar bill. "But if you're willing to take that risk, who am I to say no?" I matched his dollar, and Mrs. Miller, clearly enjoying the whole exchange, printed out our ticket. "You two should pick the numbers together," she suggested, her eyes twinkling with mischief. So we did. Standing there at the counter, shoulders touching, we called out numbers that meant something to us. My mom's birthday, the number of his childhood home, the day he moved to Oak Ridge, my lucky number 7. With each number, we shared a little piece of ourselves, and I felt something shift in the air between us. A connection forming, tentative but undeniable. As Mrs. Miller handed us the ticket, Eli looked at me. "So how do we decide who keeps it?" "Rock, Paper, scissors? I suggested, and he laughed again. How about I keep it? But I promise on my honor to contact you if we win. I'm trustworthy, I swear. He placed his hand over his heart in a solemn gesture that was undermined by the playful glint in his eyes. How would you even contact me? You don't have my number, I pointed out. And that's how I ended up writing my phone number on the back of his receipt, our fingers brushing as I handed it to him. That simple touch sending a current of electricity up my arm. He carefully folded the receipt and tucked it into his wallet. I'll guard this with my life, he said, his tone light, but his eyes serious. And I'll call you Wednesday night after the drawing. Win or lose. Maybe we could celebrate or commiserate over coffee. I nodded, trying to contain the ridiculous grin that threatened to take over my face. It's a date, I said, and then immediately backtracked. I mean, not a date, just a meeting between lottery partners. He just smiled, that warm, knowing smile. Right, lottery partners. I like the sound of that. As he left the store, the little bell jingling behind him, Mrs. Miller looked at me with raised eyebrows. Well, she said, dragging out each word. Isn't he something? It's just a lottery ticket, Mrs. Miller, I said, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. She just chuckled and went back to her magazine. Whatever you say, dear. I finally remembered my ice cream, now probably half melted, and went back to retrieve it. But as I stood in front of the open freezer, the cold air washing over me, I realized I wasn't in the mood for ice cream anymore. I was in the mood for something else entirely, something new and unexpected, something that felt a lot like possibility. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. I found myself checking my phone more often than usual, even though I knew Eli wouldn't call until after the drawing. I told myself it was ridiculous to be this excited about a guy I'd barely met, but there was something about him that had gotten under my skin. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like he was really seeing me. Or maybe it was just that he was new, different from the boys I'd grown up with, whose lives and futures were as familiar to me as my own. Wednesday evening finally arrived, and I found myself back at Miller's Corner store. I hadn't planned to go there, but my feet seemed to take me there of their own accord. Mrs. Miller smiled knowingly when I walked in, but didn't comment on my presence. I pretended to browse the magazines, but my eyes kept drifting to the door, waiting for the bell to jingle. And then it did, and there he was. Eli, looking even better than I remembered in a simple white t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. Our eyes met across the store, and he smiled. That same warm, genuine smile that had been playing on repeat in my mind for the past day. Fancy meeting you here, he said as he approached, his voice teasing. Anyone would think you were waiting for me. I rolled my eyes, trying to play it cool despite the warmth spreading across my cheeks. Don't flatter yourself. I was just picking up some gum. I grabbed a random pack from the display next to me. Ah, yes. Essential purchase, he nodded seriously, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. Well, since you're here, want to check the ticket together? The drawing should have just happened. My heart did a little skip. I'd almost forgotten the actual reason for our meeting, the lottery ticket. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. Though I should warn you, I've never won anything in my life. Not even a game of bingo at my grandma's retirement home. He pulled the ticket from his pocket with a flourish. Well, that's about to change. I can feel it. He pulled out his phone and looked up the winning numbers, then held the ticket between us so we could both see it. As he read out the numbers, comparing them to our ticket, I found myself holding my breath. Not because I actually expected to win. The chances were astronomically against us. But because of how close he was standing, how I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and clean that made me want to lean in closer. And the last number is 17, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. Jamie, we've got 4 numbers. What? I grabbed the ticket from him, double-checking. Are you serious? He nodded, a grin spreading across his face. 4 numbers. That's a win. I couldn't believe it. We'd actually won something. Not the jackpot, of course, but according to Eli's quick search on his phone, for matching numbers meant a prize of about $100. $50 each. Not life-changing money by any means, but there was something magical about it nonetheless. We won. I repeated, the reality of it sinking in. We actually won. Mrs. Miller, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop, came over with a wide smile. Congratulations, you two. I always say, there's something special about couples who buy tickets together. It's good luck. Oh, we're not. I started to correct her, but Eli cut me off. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. I think you might be right about that luck. He winked at me, and I felt that now familiar flutter in my chest. We decided to cash in the ticket right there, with Mrs. Miller officiating the transaction with all the solemnity of a wedding ceremony. She counted out the cash and handed it to Eli, who immediately divided it, handing me my share. To new friends and unexpected winnings, he said, his fingers lingering on mine as he passed me the money. To lottery partners, I replied, echoing his words from before. We left the store together, stepping out into the warm evening air. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the street. Without discussing it, we both turned and started walking in the same direction, our steps falling into sync. So, about that coffee, Eli said after a moment. I believe we had plans to celebrate our inevitable win. I smiled, tucking my share of the winnings into my pocket. I believe we did. Though given the hour, maybe we should make it dinner instead? There's a pretty good pizza place just down the block. Lead the way, lottery partner. The pizza place was called Gino's, a small, family-owned restaurant with checkered tablecloths and the best thin-crust pizza in town. The owner, Tony, greeted me by name and showed us to a booth by the window. As we settled in, I realized I was nervous. This felt like a date, despite my earlier protestations to the contrary. Eli seemed to sense my nervousness and immediately set about putting me at ease. He told me about his move from Chicago, how he'd come to Oak Ridge for a job at the local newspaper as a photographer. He'd always wanted to live in a small town, he said, somewhere where people knew each other's names and you could see the stars at night. And what about you? He asked, after the pizza had arrived and we'd both had a slice. Have you always lived here? I nodded, taking a sip of my soda. Born and raised. Never left except for college, and even then I only went to state, which is just a couple hours away. Do you like it here? His question was simple, but something in his tone made me pause, made me consider my answer more carefully than I might have otherwise. I used to think I wanted to leave, I admitted. Go somewhere bigger, more exciting. But lately, I don't know. There's something about knowing a place so well, about having history somewhere. It gets under your skin. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. I get that. That's what I was looking for, I think. A place to put down roots. The conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about everything and nothing. Our families, our jobs, our dreams. I told him about my art, how I'd been drawing since I could hold a pencil, but had never quite figured out how to turn it into a career. He told me about his photography, how he loved capturing moments that might otherwise be forgotten. You should show me your art sometime, he said, and there was something in his voice, a sincerity that made my heart skip. Maybe I will, I replied, and I meant it. As the evening wore on, I found myself relaxing more and more in his company. There was something about Eli that felt comfortable, like we'd known each other much longer than just a couple of days. And yet, there was also that undercurrent of attraction, the way my skin seemed to tingle whenever his hand accidentally brushed mine, the way I couldn't help but notice the curve of his lips when he smiled. After dinner, we walked back toward Miller's, where we'd both parked our cars. The night had cooled slightly, and the stars were out, bright points of light in the clear sky. We walked slowly, neither of us seeming in a hurry for the evening to end. So, Eli said as we approached the store, now closed for the night, its windows dark. What are you going to do with your winnings? $50 can buy a lot of gum. He nodded toward my pocket, where I'd stashed both the money and the pack of gum I'd impulsively bought earlier. I laughed, shaking my head. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll buy some new art supplies. Or maybe I'll save it for a rainy day. What about you? He stopped walking, turning to face me. We were standing under a streetlight, its glow casting soft shadows across his face. I was thinking, he said, his voice dropping slightly, that maybe I'd use it to take you out again. Properly this time. Not just as lottery partners. My breath caught in my throat. Are you asking me on a date, Eli? He took a step closer, and I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. Yes, Jamie. I am definitely asking you on a date. I pretended to consider it, tapping my chin thoughtfully. Well, I don't know. My schedule is pretty packed with, buying gum and waiting around in corner stores. He laughed, that full, rich laugh that I was quickly becoming addicted to. I'm willing to work around your busy gum-buying schedule. In that case, I said, smiling up at him, I accept. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Eli's gaze dropped to my lips, then back up to my eyes, a question in them. I found myself leaning forward slightly, drawn to him like a magnet. You know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think I've figured out how I want to claim my share of the winnings. Oh, I managed, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. He reached up, his hand gently cupping my cheek. If it's okay with you, I'd like to claim it as your first kiss. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. That seems like a fair exchange, I whispered. And then he was leaning in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was soft and sweet and perfect. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, drawing me closer, and I found my own hands moving to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under my palm. The kiss deepened, and I felt like I was floating, anchored only by his touch. When we finally pulled apart, both a little breathless, Eli rested his forehead against mine. Worth every penny, he murmured, and I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me, a place that felt lighter and brighter than it had in a long time. I don't know, I teased. That was only a $50 kiss. I'm not sure you got your money's worth. His eyes darkened slightly, his smile turning mischievous. Well, then, I guess I'll just have to keep collecting until I feel like I've gotten a fair return on my investment. And then he was kissing me again, and I was kissing him back, and the world around us seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us under the streetlight, our lottery winnings forgotten in our pockets. That night marked the beginning of something special between Eli and me. Our first official date was to an art gallery in the next town over, where we spent hours wandering among the exhibits, talking about what moved us, what left us cold, what made us see the world differently. Our second date was a hike to the top of Oak Ridge Hill, where Eli took photographs and I sketched the view, our shoulders touching as we sat side by side on a fallen log. With each date, each conversation, each kiss, we grew closer. I showed him all my favorite spots in town, the hidden bench in the park where I went to read, the bakery that made the best cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, the rooftop of the old movie theater where you could sneak up to watch the sunset if you knew the right people. And he showed me how to see my hometown through new eyes, finding beauty in places I'd long since stopped noticing. 2 months after our lottery win, Eli sold one of his photographs to a national magazine, a shot of Miller's corner store at dusk, the neon sign glowing warmly against the darkening sky. We celebrated with champagne on the rooftop of his apartment building, and as we toasted to his success, he told me he loved me for the first time. I said it back without hesitation, the words feeling as natural as breathing. Our lottery ticket, now framed and hanging on the wall of Eli's apartment, became a symbol of our relationship, a reminder that sometimes the biggest wins come from the smallest chances, that sometimes you have to split the cost to reap the full reward. A year later, on the anniversary of our meeting, Eli took me back to Miller's corner store. Mrs. Miller, who'd become one of our biggest supporters, winked at me as we walked in, but I was too nervous to notice. Eli had been acting strange all day, and I had a feeling something was up. He led me to the exact spot where we'd first decided to go halfsies on the lottery ticket and got down on one knee. The ring he held up was simple but beautiful, a small diamond set in a band of intertwined gold and silver. "Jamie," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. "A year ago, we took a chance on a lottery ticket, and I won something far more valuable than money. I won you. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life collecting on that win." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Through my tears, I managed to say yes, and as he slipped the ring onto my finger, the entire store erupted in applause. Mrs. Miller had gathered all our friends and family, who'd been hiding behind shelves and in the back room, waiting for this moment. Later, as we celebrated with everyone, Eli whispered in my ear, "You know, I never did cash in all of my share of that lottery win." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled, that same warm smile that had captured my heart a year ago. "Well, I claimed your first kiss, but I figure I'm owed a lifetime of them to make it a fair exchange." I laughed, wrapping my arms around his neck. "That seems like a reasonable request. I think we can work something out." And as he leaned down to kiss me, surrounded by the people we loved in the corner store where our story began, I couldn't help but think that some gambles, like splitting the cost of a lottery ticket with a handsome stranger, were absolutely worth taking. They say luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. But sometimes, I think, luck is just the universe's way of bringing together two people who might otherwise never have found each other. Eli and I, we didn't win the Powerball jackpot that day, but we won something far more valuable, a chance at love, a beginning, a story to tell our grandchildren someday about how we went halfsies on a lottery ticket and how he claimed his share as my first kiss. And that, my friends, is a win beyond measure. Total _char_count, 18,864.